Hello. Today's lecture will cover computer security. Computer security is a very broad topic. We will talk both about how you can take some actions to be secure in your own use of a computer, and also discuss some broader societal computer security issues based on the disclosures by Edward Snowden about the NSA, what that's all about, what the NSA is doing as far as we know, and kind of why that was a big deal. So first I just want to give you a few recommendations about how to secure a wireless router. If you have a wireless router in your house, like you use a laptop to connect to the internet and you don't have it plugged into a router, you're using a wireless router. It's probably somewhere in a closet somewhere connected to your home network. If you're using a wireless router, you should make sure that it's set up in a secure manner. To do that, you should make sure that you have WPA or WPA2 enabled with CCNP or AES. CCNP and AES are the same thing. Some routers call it CCNP, some routers call it AES. Do not use WEP or TKIP with the wireless router. Those are both insecure. You want to make sure that you use a good password for your wireless router. Now, using a good password is something that you should do for pretty much anything. If you have trouble coming up with good passwords, there are programs that can help you. For instance, I have one installed here. Whether you use this one or another one, this is the type of password that would be a secure password. So for instance, this command will generate a 15-character password, and it just uses random letters. If I wanted instead an 11-character password, it would do like that, and in a few minutes it'll come up with one. This is the automated password generator, I believe, is what this is called. And you can use this, or there is a program called KeepPassX, which is kind of a more user-friendly program. It can, in addition to generating passwords, it provides a way where you can keep them. So just make sure that you have a good way of generating random passwords. Good passwords, I'd say they should be, for wireless routers, should be at least 15 characters. For a website, it should be at least 10. For disk encryption, which we're going to talk about later, I'd say probably it should be at least 17 or 18 characters to be secure for a disk encryption password. And that's assuming that you're using actual random letters. If you're using passwords like that would not be secure, because that's not really a random password. And there are algorithms that can go through and substitute E with 3 and things like that in order to reduce the number of guesses required to crack the password. So you want to use really random letters. You don't want to take a word and then do something like that to try to make it secure. It's better to just start out with random letters. And if you're having trouble keeping track of it, well, there KeepPassX, which I just told you about, that will keep passwords securely stored on your computer so that you don't have to remember them. So anyway, back to wireless routers. Do remember that it is good to know how to generate secure passwords. And I would highly recommend looking into that tool, KeepPassX, if you're having trouble using different passwords. Since we're talking about passwords, before I continue with the wireless security, you should use a different password for every website. Again, if you can't remember them all, use KeepPassX, or just write them down somewhere in your house and put them on keep them in a file cabinet or something, whatever works for you. If your house is secure, if you're not worried about somebody breaking into your house and stealing it, then writing them down is okay. Just make sure you use secure passwords and make sure that you don't reuse a password. So, back to wireless security. Do not enable WPS on your router. If your router features WPS, make sure it's disabled. WPS was supposed to provide an easy way to add new laptops or new devices to a wireless network, but it had a flaw in it. It's insecure, so you should disable it. So now let's talk a little bit about malware. How does your computer get infected? If you ever had a virus on your computer, how does that happen? Well, it happens a number of ways. Probably the most common way, especially these days, is installing malicious software from a website. So you go to some website, it offers some software for download, and you download it, install it, and it seems to work fine. But in addition to installing whatever software it said it was going to install, it also includes a malicious program. These are called Trojan horses, malicious programs that masquerade as something else. The best way to avoid that is make sure that the websites you download your software from are legitimate. SourceForge is a legitimate website. GitHub is a legitimate website. There could be malicious projects on those sites, however, the maintainers of GitHub and SourceForge probably will take those down fairly quickly if anything like that is going on. And then, just searching for things on Google and making sure you get to the official website for whatever software you're installing is important. Finally, you shouldn't do this anyway because it's a violation of copyright, but if you download software from websites like the Pirate Bay or something like that, well, there's a good chance that that software is malicious. Because basically, if it is malicious, nobody can really take it down. Second way that people often get infected with malware is opening infected email attachments. So that means you get an email, spam email, and you click on the attachment and open it in Microsoft Word, and it has a Word macro or something in it that goes and installs some malicious software in your computer and makes it part of a botnet of some kind, probably sending more spam email to other people. The way to avoid doing that is don't open email attachments from someone you don't trust. However, I do want to point out that it is trivial to spoof someone's email address. So even if it looks like it's coming from your friend or something, it could be that your friend got infected with a virus and the virus is sending you an email to try to infect you with the virus after getting your email address off of your friend's computer. It could also be that this is just some random person who's pretending to be your friend sending you email. There is no protection in the email protocol for making sure that the sender of an email is actually the person who sent the email. You can't trust the from address in an email. The only way you can really get some security with email is to use PGP, which we'll talk about later in this lecture. And finally, the final way that people get infected with malware is if you run a server, like a web server or something on your computer, and that program has a security vulnerability on it because you haven't been updating it, keeping up with the security updates or something like that, you can get infected that way. Someone can break into the server and install malware on your server that way. Now, most of you probably aren't running web servers on your computers, so I don't think that applies as much to you as to website owners. But I mention it because if you go to a legitimate website and download and get a virus from it some kind of way, it might be the case that that legitimate website was taken over by a malicious an attacker who is now using that server to try and infect other people. Some other ways you can get infected with malware. This is less common than these three that I just told you about. Just visiting a malicious website without downloading anything is sometimes enough to get infected. If there is a vulnerability in your web browser or a vulnerability in a plugin for your web browser. A number of browser plugins are on the way out. Most major browser authors have deprecated or even disabled support for them. The only plugins of note that really remain are Adobe Flash and Oracle Java. Of those two, Java is fairly secure. Flash has a long history of innumerable security vulnerabilities. It's probably been in its history the single most destructive program as far as reducing the overall security of the internet, of anything. I have no idea how it got, why it is as bad as it is, but after 15 years of fixing security vulnerabilities, you still hear about a vulnerability in Flash, twice a month, and you have to update it, or potentially someone could take over your computer with an infected Flash plugin. Flash is used for a number of things, mostly animation. So YouTube, if you use an older web browser with YouTube, it might use Flash to play the YouTube videos. If you watch something from Amazon Instant Video or Netflix or something like that, sometimes it'll use Flash to play the video. So videos, it's used for videos a lot. It's also used in banner ads quite a bit. And there are a few Flash games. There are websites that have some simple, kind of fairly dumb little games where you click on things and it runs inside of your web browser. So that's typically what Flash is used for. And if you get infected just by visiting a website, I wager 9 times out of 10 it's because you had an outdated Flash plugin. If you open or even just receive without opening a malicious email, very rarely that is enough to infect your computer. That used to be more of an issue when email programs were not as secure as they are today. Most of the time you would have to open an infected attachment to get infected from an email these days. But historically, this was possible. It was possible to just open an email and get infected that way. Finally, last way you might get infected is if the NSA is targeting you and you go to www.google.com, the NSA might hijack your connection to Google because they can do that. They have servers posted at various choke points of the internet so that they can intercept someone's connection to any website they want. And then the NSA would instead of getting to Google, because the NSA intercepted your connection, you would go to some malicious NSA-run imposter website, which would then infect your computer, because the NSA has a bunch of security vulnerabilities that they've just stockpiled so that they can infect people when they want to. And so we'll talk a little bit more about the NSA later. But that's one way you can get infected. Probably pretty rare. And if the NSA isn't targeting you because for any reason, you probably don't have to worry about that one, because every time the NSA uses a security vulnerability, they potentially burn it, meaning that it potentially might get found out. They might get found out for using that vulnerability, and then the software author fixes the vulnerability and they can't use it anymore. So they're pretty judicious about doing this only with people they suspect of terrorism. So if you're not a suspected terrorist, you're probably okay. So how to avoid getting infected based on what I just said. Well, first, recognize that the sender of an email can be trivially spoofed. Be very careful about opening attachments in emails. Because even if you trust the sender could not be the sender. The actual sender of the email might be different from the person in the from address. One way this has happened, one personal experience I've had with this, I have an @netscape.net email address, which is run by AOL. So my email, at one time, about a year ago, AOL got hacked. AOL got hacked, and the attackers were able to download the email addresses and address books of many of AOL's customers, or, well, subscribers, or not subscribers, many people who had an AOL.com or AIM.com, which is also run by AOL, or Netscape.net, which was my email address. Their webmail users, their email addresses got downloaded, as well as their address books. So the attackers, apparently based on what happened to me, the attackers had my email address, and they had the email addresses of many of the people that I had ever sent an email to or received an email from. And so I got a bunch of bounce emails basically saying, like, you know, you need to subscribe to this list to post to it, something like that. It was clear that emails were being sent with my name and the from address to people that I had talked to. Now, I don't think any of my friends or contacts got infected that way. I haven't heard anything like that or anything. However, it would be possible, because even though I didn't send the email, even though my computer wasn't infected, the webmail provider got hacked. And so they were able to potentially construct an email that looked like it came from me and send it to someone who recognized my name. So you just have to be very, very careful about opening attachments in emails. PGP would fix this problem if everybody used PGP, but everybody doesn't use PGP. We'll get to PGP later. Also be very careful about clicking links from emails, because remember, emails can be spoofed. So one way that a lot of people get into trouble is they get an email that appears to be from their bank, and they click a link and it'll say something like, for security reasons, Bank of America is requiring that all internet banking users reset their passwords. Click this link to reset your password. You click the link, it actually takes you not to bankofamerica.com, but to some random website run by a hacker. And the form comes up and it says, okay, type your username, type your old password, now choose a new password. Well, you type your username, type your old password, choose a new password, click submit, and now some hacker has your internet banking username and password, because you didn't actually reset your password because it wasn't actually the bank's website. So now the attacker has your username because you typed it in, and your password because you typed in your old password when you were going through the fake password reset email. So now they take your username and your still current password, go to the actual banking website, pretend to be you, and withdraw all your money. So be very careful about clicking links in emails, especially if it seems to be from somewhere like eBay, PayPal, certainly a bank, any place where you have, you know, an account and where you might be asked to enter your account's username and password. Now, a lot of financial services, to try to avoid this problem somewhat, have done things like have you choose a picture where you log into the bank and a picture of a bird comes up or something, and you chose the picture of the bird. And if it doesn't have the picture of the bird, the bank says, well, don't trust it because because you're not actually on our website. Better thing to do is just never click a link in an email to your bank's website. I always log into my online banking and credit card website, things like that, by typing in the URL into my web browser. I never click on links from emails, and I suggest that you do the same. Anything in a banner ad. Be suspicious of anything you find in a banner ad. Some banner ads are legitimate, some others will take you to illegitimate websites where they might offer some free software to download, and you download it, run it, it's actually a Trojan horse. Relatedly, and I mention this especially because the textbook says to use security software. Be very suspicious of online security services that you stumble upon. So if you just come across some random website and it says install this antivirus or anti-malware program, and you've never heard of it before, or you've heard of it before but you're not sure that you're actually on the legitimate website, be very careful about that. These can be fake and malicious software. You might install some security software and it actually installs a virus on your computer because it's not really security software. If you want to install an antivirus program, which is not a bad idea, especially if you're on Windows, I recommend AVG Free, which this is the website for it, free.avg.com. This is a legitimate security piece of security software, and it's free, so you don't have to pay for it. And so if you do want to install some antivirus software, that would be a good choice. And then the last thing I want to mention is firewalls are overrated. And I don't mean that they're bad, I just mean that often they don't really do anything. If you're behind a NAT, which meaning Network Address Translation Unit, they don't really do anything beyond what the NAT already does. NATs are, well, NATs are basically home routers, and often corporate routers too, but not always. If you have a home internet connection and you have a wireless router in a closet or somewhere, and you have multiple computers in your house, so you might have, maybe you're on a laptop and someone else in your family's also on a laptop. The way that the wireless router provides service to both of you, even though you only have a single connection that you're paying for to the internet, is that it makes both of your computers look like one computer, and then routes packets to one computer or another computer depending on which computer sent the original request. So long story short, anybody trying to connect to you from over the internet, their connection is going to be dropped by the NAT, because the NAT isn't going to be able to recognize that connection since it's not a real connection. And so it'll drop the connection because it doesn't know which laptop behind the router to route it to. And that's exactly what a firewall does. What a firewall does is it drops connections that you did not initiate. So you can still get infected even if you have this. The only thing that a firewall really solves, the only type of attack the firewall solves, is this one. If you're running a server program on your computer and it has a security vulnerability, well, the server program can't actually be used if you're running a firewall that blocks all connections to it, because nobody can connect to a server that's not responding to any connections, And so if you're accidentally running a server on your computer and you're behind a NAT, a firewall, the NAT or firewall will protect you. If you go to a malicious website, you requested that website, you typed it in and you pressed enter in your web browser. If you got an email, you downloaded that email. Your email client connected to the email server downloaded that email. You're almost always, unless you're running a server, you are requesting every connection that comes to your computer. And a firewall or a NAT, because a NAT is a type of firewall, won't protect you against that. So you can certainly run a personal firewall on your computer if you want to. That won't do anything bad, except that it might make it hard to host online games or things like that. If you're trying to play a multiplayer game with somebody and you're trying to be the server, the game server, well, firewalls interfere with servers. That's what they do. That's what they're supposed to do. And so it will interfere with your attempt to run that server. You have to disable it or tell the firewall not to block connections to that particular server that you're running. So it might complicate your ability to do that, to run some sort of game server. That's really the only thing that it would interfere with for a typical home user, I think. So you can run one if you want, but don't really put much faith in it, because you already have a firewall almost certainly if you have a wireless router in your house, and another firewall on top of that one isn't really going to do much of anything. So that everything I said should be enough if you're not worried about being hacked by the NSA. And you probably don't have to worry about being hacked by the NSA, because you're probably, well, most people probably are not that interesting to the NSA. Unless you have contacts with terrorist groups, they really probably don't care that much about you. However, you can't be sure, because maybe they think you have contacts with terrorist groups even if you don't, or who knows. So let's talk a little bit about the NSA, what the NSA has been doing, and what that whole big political mess with Edward Snowden was about. Just recently, as in a few days ago, as I'm making this lecture, Congress voted on and Obama signed the USA Freedom Act, which limited the NSA's ability to do bulk data collection. So what the NSA is doing, what the deal with Edward Snowden was, is the NSA was recording, downloading the emails of, I believe they were downloading the full text of the emails, not just the metadata. And they were recording all phone connections. They weren't downloading the phone calls, but they were recording who called whom and for how long, of basically everybody. And then they used software to go through that mountain of data that they siphoned from internet servers and phone networks and things like that, and tried to find interesting things about it. Like, if they knew this person was a terrorist and he called this person more than 2 times in a week, look at that person, because that person might be a terrorist too, or something like that. They weren't looking for just terrorism, they were also looking for drug dealers, things like that. And if they found one, they would tell the FBI basically, watch this guy. They wouldn't say anything more than that, because the FBI had to discover the evidence by itself, because what the NSA doing was illegal and couldn't be used in court. So they told the FBI basically, look at this guy. And then the FBI would try to find a way to get evidence on that person without violating the Constitution, so that the evidence could be used in court. So that's what the NSA was doing to everybody. What the NSA does to people in particular when they're interested in them, and by the way, this is what the FBI does too, except on a smaller scale. Most law enforcement will do things like this if they're trying to hack into a suspect's computer. What the NSA does to people in particular is they will they will use unreleased security vulnerabilities, so security vulnerabilities that everybody is vulnerable to because the companies don't know about them yet, and try to infect the person's computer by sending them malicious emails, intercepting their connection to legitimate websites and instead sending them to an imposter website that installs malicious software on their computer. Things like that. And so that's what you have to protect against. You have to protect against being hacked by an organization that knows about security vulnerabilities that the software manufacturers don't know about. And so that's hard to do, because if the manufacturer doesn't know about it, how can you know about it? It hasn't been released. There's no patch for it. So there are a number of techniques to use. Before I go any further with this, I want to mention also the FBI does this too. So this is kind of, and large criminal organizations do this too. So this is not just how to avoid getting hacked by the NSA, it's how to avoid getting hacked by a government, like a foreign government. Maybe if you're working for a company that does something really secret, a foreign government might try to do some industrial espionage by hacking into you, your network. Foreign large criminal syndicates might have these capabilities. So it's not just the NSA, it's not just law enforcement, it's anyone with a lot of resources. They're often called advanced persistent threats by security experts because they're organized, they're patient, and they have a lot of capabilities. So if you're up against someone like that, what can you do? Well, it's doable. You actually do stand a chance. The first thing you want to do is always use up-to-date web browsers and keep all of your software as up-to-date as possible. Just always keep it up-to-date, because the NSA might not be willing to potentially burn a vulnerability on you, meaning that they might not want to use a vulnerability that they know is in every copy of that software because it hasn't been patched yet. Because if you catch them doing that, you can release the vulnerability to the manufacturer, and then they've lost that vulnerability because everybody will be patched against it pretty soon. So raise the cost for them by always using an up-to-date web browser. Another good thing, very good thing to do, probably the most important thing to do in a high security environment, is to do all of your web browsing and connecting to the internet from inside of a quarantined virtual machine that can only communicate with the outside world through Tor or a VPN. So you don't want them to be able to get your IP address. If you're this worried about somebody, you probably don't want them to be able to get your IP address. Which means that you'd want to use some anonymity software like this, which we're going to talk about later. One thing that this would have protected against, the FBI took over a website hosted through Tor, which had a lot of illegal material on it. And then they tried to find people to investigate by, instead of taking that website with the illegal material down, they put malware on it. And what the malware did was infected their web browser and sent their IP address back to the FBI. Well, if the web browser doesn't have your actual IP address, that won't work. That type of attack won't work. So if you want to be able to visit a website without, if you visit a website through Tor and you want to protect against an attack on your web browser, where the web browser just sends your information right back to whatever attacker you're worried about, it's best to use a virtual machine to deal with that. And finally, when you're done web browsing, reset the virtual machine to a known state. So back up the virtual machine before you use it. After you use it, assume it's infected, so restore it from your backup. Always. Whether or not you really think it's infected or not, just in case, wipe it. There's no reason to keep it around after you've used it. And so this doesn't guarantee that you won't get infected, but if you follow this advice, infections won't be able to find out who you are. The infections will be deleted after every time you use it because you're resetting the virtual machine to a known state, and they won't be able to reach anything outside the virtual machine because the virtual machine doesn't have access to anything on your actual computer. If you're looking for kind of a turnkey solution, Whonix is the best one that I know about. So what Whonix does is it's got a diagram right here. The concept is you have a virtual machine on your computer which doesn't have access to anything outside the virtual machine, and its only connection to the outside world is through Tor. You have another virtual machine called the Whonix Gateway, which is where the Tor server is hosted. So when this guy wants to access the internet, it connects to this guy, which bounces your connection through Tor and gets to the internet. So this workstation does not have your real IP address, and it doesn't have the ability to connect to the internet except through Tor. So it has no ability. So if you run a web browser here, the website you're visiting doesn't know who you are, and even if they hack your web browser, they still don't know who you are. So anyone who was visiting that FBI website I talked about earlier who was using this wouldn't have been gotten caught by or found out by the FBI's method. And I'm mentioning the FBI, the NSA, government organizations a lot. That's just because they're often the most advanced attackers, and they're the attackers that we hear about because governments have some measure of transparency. So, the FBI was looking for child pornographers. So, you don't really want to say, yay, they wouldn't have gotten caught, or yay, they didn't get caught in that particular case. But the technique the FBI was using was breaking a security system that can be used by anyone, not just criminals, just normal people can and do use the security system. And so we do want to patch holes in that security system. And this is one way to patch the hole that the FBI exploited. I mean, good job. Don't get me wrong. The FBI did a good job by making use of that vulnerability. But we don't want to keep vulnerabilities around just so that the FBI can hack into people's computers when they want to. Or maybe we do. That's actually a public debate right now, which I'll get to in a minute. But for right now, back to these slides. This is all I have to say about this slide. So now let's talk about privacy. Privacy is something that's not hard to do, except that nobody else is doing this stuff, so it's hard to get other people to protect their privacy and yours when communicating with them. If you want private email, there is an easy way to do it. You use PGP. PGP stands for Pretty Good Privacy, which is it's supposed to be a humorous understatement. It is extremely good privacy. Done correctly, there's no known way to break into it, so nobody can break into it, as far as we know, if it's done right. And the tools like Mailvelope and Enigmail, Enigmail is probably the best one, make this practical. So if you want to send private emails to people, this is what you do. The Gmail can't read it. Anyone sniffing the connection can't read it. The NSA can't read it. Criminals can't read it. nobody except the intended recipient can read it if it's done correctly. Encrypted chat is a similar to PGP email. This is the best encrypted chat thing that I know about. Uses existing chat networks, so you can use Gtalk or Facebook chat or whatever you whatever chat network you want to use, and you can use this protocol and this tool. This is a tool that has a plugin for the Pigeon Instant Messenger, among others. Pigeon supports a lot of different anything that uses the standard chat protocol, which is XMPP. Pigeon supports, and so Pigeon supports communication over Facebook, Gtalk, AOL Instant Messenger, not Skype directly, but there is a way to get it to support Skype, I think, but only for voice, not for voice communication over Skype, only for the Skype chat feature. But it supports a lot of different protocols, and this is this site has an add-on to Pigeon. So if you install Pigeon, person you want to talk to installs Pigeon, you both install this thing, well, now you can talk to each other without Google and Facebook being able to intercept it. Great. However, what I think you will find if you try to do this is that most people just don't care enough to install this software. And so that means that you can't use it either. Because if you install this but you don't have anybody to talk to, well, your communication's secure because you don't have any of it. But that poses practical difficulties because you want to talk to people who don't want to do this. So that's a little depressing. If you're watching this and you're like, yeah, I want to do this, well, you can. Just try to get good luck getting other people to do it as well. Which is kind of a shame, because I don't know if you remember, but a while back there were a lot of celebrities who had extremely private photos that they had sent to other people, posted online, and that was done, as far as we know, because someone hacked into someone we don't know who hacked into their Apple accounts, Apple email accounts, not just Apple email accounts, other email accounts that they have, things like that. They used poor passwords, we think. Either that, or they used poor security questions and poor passwords on their recovery email or something like that. Some websites have an extremely insecure thing where you can reset your password just by knowing the security question. And the security question is something like, what's your mother's maiden name? So it's something that people can find out fairly easily. In any case, however they did it, once they had hacked into the email account, they had unencrypted access to all of their emails, which included these things that they probably didn't want made public, and they were made public. If they had been using these tools, that wouldn't have worked, because they would have had to not hack into Apple or Google or Facebook, or probably not Facebook, but whatever email provider they were using. They also would have had to hack into their personal computer. So these tools do have value, and people probably should use them, but people don't, and so because it's a network effects type of thing, because nobody else uses these, it's hard for you to use it too. So depressing, but there is something that you can do. You can use disk encryption, and that provides a very good increase in your security, and I'll tell you how. And I'll tell you how in a minute. We'll get to disk encryption. But first I want to talk about LavaBit. LavaBit was a secure email provider. It was used by Edward Snowden. He had a lavabit.com email address. Law enforcement, around the time Edward Snowden was doing his thing, went to the owner of LavaBit, a small company, one employee, one guy was running it. So they went to him and said, reveal the encryption keys to the server because we want to spy on Edward Snowden. Technically, we don't know that it was Edward Snowden, but given the timing, it was almost certainly Edward Snowden. The owner of LavaBit can't reveal who they were trying to spy on, but we think it was Edward Snowden. Anyway, so the owner of LavaBit said, well, I don't want to do that because that would give you the ability to spy not just on Edward Snowden, but on everybody else who uses this service too, and you don't have any kind of probable cause to spy on those people, you only have probable cause to spy on Edward Snowden. That argument didn't work. They still said, well, reveal the keys. They took him to court. He fought the subpoena. He lost. He appealed. He lost again. Then he provided the encryption key to LavaBit in 2-point font on 4 sheets of paper. Encryption keys, if you print them out on paper, can be fairly, they can take up a lot of space. So that was unusable. So the law enforcement took him again to court again and said, make him reveal the key in a way that we can actually use. The judge told him, said, yeah, you have to do that. Judges generally aren't amused by things like what he did with the printing it out in 2-point font. They will typically not look kindly on that. So the judge said, reveal the encryption key, or I'm going to fine you $10,000 every day that you don't. So after about 3 days, he decided he didn't want to lose any more money, and he revealed the encryption key to the FBI. However, because he was so fanatical about protecting his users' privacy, he immediately shut down the service after providing keys to law enforcement. So he simultaneously provided the keys to law enforcement and shut down LavaBit. And so his users were safe, because even though law enforcement had the key, there was nothing for them to spy on once the service was shut down. Now, I tell this story because it's kind of an interesting story. Also because it kind of makes the point that, how many is Google going to do this? Well, no. Most companies are not going to be dedicated enough to protecting their users' privacy to where they will risk contempt of court charges and rather than compromise their users' privacy, just shut down the whole company. LavaBit's users got extremely lucky in that way, because they had a really, really dedicated owner of the company protecting them. Google is not going to be that dedicated protecting you. Apple is not going to be that dedicated protecting you. So the lesson here, the point that I want to make is, don't trust companies to protect your privacy for you. They have business reasons sometimes to violate your privacy. They are targets. Hackers know that if they compromise Google or Apple, they will get a lot of people's emails or information. So they're targets that, even the company probably might be good at protecting its own security, but maybe not. There are rogue employees in the companies. How many people work for Google? Is any one of them unethical enough to perhaps spy on people's emails? We know that's happened, not too many times, but it has happened. So basically, it's best if you take your privacy into your own hands, which means using publicly verifiable systems for your security. Security experts have looked at PGP and the one OTR off-the-record chat, and they know, they've looked at it and they say, well, yeah, this is a technique that should work. And it protects against anyone else reading the material, not, the company you're using for your communication even can't read your emails or your chats. And so if you're concerned about your security, it's best to use this. It's best to use these types of programs that don't rely on any single company or any single organization being completely uncorruptible or completely secure. So, now let's talk about disk encryption. I like disk encryption. I've done research on disk encryption. My project on disk encryption was loop amnesia. Now, I'll talk about this first. What is this? Loop amnesia and Trezor are similar programs which are supposed to protect against somebody, an attacker, physically taking your computer, ripping out the RAM. RAM is they're those little sticks of microchips. They're typically like kind of long rectangles of circuit board rectangles. Ripping out the RAM that has like whatever you're currently working on in it, and then getting the encryption key by looking at what's in the RAM sticks. Both of these are for Linux, and they both protect against cold boot attack. Trezor only supports one encrypted disk. Linux, you can have more than one encrypted disk. You can also avoid the cold boot attack, which is what I just described, ripping out the RAM, getting the encryption keys from that. You can also avoid the cold boot attack if you turn your computer completely off when you're not using it. A computer that is completely off and has been off for about 5 minutes or so is not going to be vulnerable to the cold boot attack. Now, loop amnesia and Trezor have some usability problems. So let's talk about what you probably should use if you want to encrypt your disk. Disk encryption is intended to protect against someone who has physical access to your computer from being able to read it. So disk encryption won't protect your emails, because the emails are probably stored on Google's server or something, and so Google has access to them. It won't protect your communication. If you communicate with somebody else and that communication is intercepted, it won't protect that. What it will protect is if you have, say, a diary that you keep on your computer. If you periodically open up Microsoft Word and type it and say, "Dear diary," blah blah blah, and you say stuff that you don't want other people to read, and you just keep it on your computer, you don't upload it to Google Docs or anything like that. You just save it locally on a file on your computer. Disk encryption will protect that when somebody comes and steals your laptop and turns it on, or takes the hard disk out and tries to look and see what interesting stuff is on it. So, if you want to encrypt your disk, and it does provide some benefits, what should you do? Well, BitLocker and FileVault are Windows and Mac OS's native disk encryption utilities. So that would be the most convenient thing to do, and it's certainly better than nothing. But we don't know exactly how they work, because the source code for it is not published, meaning that programmers outside of Microsoft and Apple can't look at it and make sure that they're legit, that they don't have any backdoors for the NSA or something, that they don't have any just programming errors that might make them vulnerable to some sort of attack. People have looked at the publicly available implementations of PGP and OTR and things like that, and they can say, yeah, other programmers from around the world, they can look at that and they can say, yeah, that works, that's good, they didn't make any mistakes. And a lot of people can look at it. That's not the case with BitLocker and FileVault. Linux, everything in Linux is open source, meaning the source code's published, and so people can look at dencrypt and loop AES, which are the native Linux disk encryption utilities. So those are probably okay. But if you're not using Linux, what you should probably use on Windows and Mac OS is TrueCrypt. Now TrueCrypt's got an interesting story. On May 28th, 2014, TrueCrypt abruptly and unexpectedly shut down and suggested moving to BitLocker, FileVault, or dencrypt. They posted a new version of TrueCrypt that only had decryption capability. Now the TrueCrypt developers are, and always have been, completely anonymous. So Alyssa Rowan, who is also an anonymous person, announced that there were hidden signals in the final version of TrueCrypt indicating that the TrueCrypt developers were acting under duress. Like some government or criminals got to them and forced them to stop developing TrueCrypt. And so she can't say what the nature of the duress was, just that the signals were there. So that's interesting. And so Alyssa Rowan, whoever that is, says TrueCrypt 7.2 shouldn't be run, and anything from the official TrueCrypt developers shouldn't be trusted because they're acting under duress. So, whatever. That's enough, for me at least, that's enough to say, okay, let's not trust that. However, TrueCrypt source code is available, and it's been audited. Some people raised, I don't know, $100,000 or so back in 2013 to audit the TrueCrypt source, and they paid programmers to look through every single line of code and make sure that it was good. Make sure that it was good. And the audited version is 7.1a. So the TrueCrypt source for 7.1a is fine. You can use that. It doesn't matter what Alyssa Rowan or anybody else says, because people have looked at the source and verified that it's okay. So I recommend using TrueCrypt on Windows and Mac OS, and this is where you should go to get it. TrueCrypt.org is run by the official developers, but we don't know for sure whether it's malicious. So this is the site where you would want to go to get the official version of TrueCrypt. So this is TrueCrypt 7.1a, the official version of TrueCrypt, and you can download it from here. Windows, Mac OS, Linux, all supported. There's another site, CipherShed, which is working. It's by the same people who run TrueCrypt.ch, and it's working on the next version of TrueCrypt. So eventually, you're going to want to go there to get the successor to TrueCrypt, most likely. But that's still in development. They're still in the early stages. Right, so that's what I just said. Now, one interesting thing that I want to talk about as far as TrueCrypt goes is plausible deniability. They have a very interesting feature. Plausible deniability is the quality of encryption, which means that you can plausibly deny that you are using encryption. You can plausibly deny that data exists. So they get your hard drive and they say what's on it, what's on this part of the hard drive, and you can say nothing. And they can't prove whether you're right or wrong. So encrypted data, if you don't have the key, looks like random junk. And so that's how this is possible, is you can't really tell whether something is random junk or encrypted data unless you have the key to it. Now, if you have, if somebody takes your computer and the entire hard disk looks like it has random junk on it, and you say, yeah, no, I just have random junk on my hard drive, there's no operating system or anything. Well, that's not really plausible, because how could you be using the computer if you didn't have an operating system on it? Why would you have a computer that just has a bunch of random junk on the hard drive? So plausible deniability is trying to get a little creative and make it so that you can actually say, and have it not be obviously a lie, that you don't have encrypted data where encrypted data actually is. So when you create a TrueCrypt volume, and you just click, it has a wizard like most software, and you just click next, 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 next without even looking at what you're doing, you will get 50% of your disk will be the TrueCrypt volume, so it'll be formatted with a file system, you can put stuff on it, and 50% of the disk will be, they'll overwrite it with actual random data, and it will simply be wasted. You won't be able to use it for anything. So why is that useful at all? Well, if you don't just click next, 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 and you check a non-default option, you instead encrypt the other half of the disk with another key. And so you get to use both of them, and each is encrypted with a different key. So the reason for this is if your computer is found and there's TrueCrypt on it and there's a TrueCrypt volume on it, and you're forced to reveal the password to the first volume, court order, somebody bashing your knees in, whatever, you can deny that there even is a second hidden volume. You can say, I just accepted the default options and the second half is filled with random junk. Now, making this even more plausible is that you can do that, and then later you can make a hidden volume. You can say, okay, change my mind, I want to change that hidden volume to look like, to actually be more stuff, to actually be encrypted with another password. And so as long as you pick a good password to the hidden volume that the adversary can't guess, nobody can know whether you're lying. And so that might be useful in certain situations. Now, I do want to, if this were a traditional class, I would now ask you all to discuss about this. And I'm going to talk about the Fifth Amendment. But before I do, I want to talk a little bit more about encryption in general, because there is, and this surprises me because, in my opinion, the horse left the barn, left the stable 10, 20 years ago, as far as this issue goes. However, it has been a current issue. The head of the FBI has come out recently and come out against encryption, saying that the FBI should be able to crack people's encryption. When they get a court order, they should be able to see someone's computer, and if there's encryption on it, they should be able to crack it. Now, I don't mean they should be able to try to crack it. Obviously, they can try to crack it. If you're arrested and there's a court order to seize all your stuff and it's encrypted, the FBI can certainly try to break into the computer. They can try, millions of different passwords and hope that they get lucky and find one that works. Now, anyone can do that, which is why it's important to use a good password. You don't want to use like a 5-character password. That can probably be done in like a few hours or something. 15-character password, if they're completely random letters, you're probably good, no matter who your adversary is. So the FBI can and does try to break into people's computers when they're arrested for crimes, and nobody's saying that they shouldn't be able to do that. What the FBI is saying is that encryption should be crippled in such a way that there is a master key that the FBI can use to break into anyone's computer without having to guess the password. The reason this has been an issue is because Apple and Google have both announced that their next set of smartphones, new versions of the new iPhones and the new Android phones, will have enabled by default disk encryption. Now, phones don't have hard disks in them, they have flash drives, but the same concept applies. You still use hard disk encryption for a phone. And so this disk encryption will be enabled by default, and neither Google nor Apple will have the ability to break into it unless you use a poor password. So right now, the FBI can go to Apple and Google and say, give us all the emails and information from this guy, and we have a subpoena, and Google can do it. Google can say, okay, yeah, here's all that guy's information. If in these new versions that's no longer going to be possible. If the FBI comes to Google and says, we want to break into this guy's phone, Google will say, well, good luck, we can't help you. And so the FBI doesn't like that. And so they're saying that, no specific proposals have been put forth as far as what what to do. But what it seems like the FBI wants to do is to outlaw encryption unless it includes what's known as a backdoor for the FBI. So backdoor has two meanings in computing. One is a well, actually, I guess it really only has one meaning. Backdoor is a secret way or a hidden way to access something. So if you create a website and whenever somebody puts in the password Dave is cool, no matter what the username is, you get access to the website. That would be a backdoor. Programmers will sometimes put those in for testing, to make it easier to test the software, make sure it's working right, and then they're supposed to take it out before it goes into production. Sometimes they don't. Oops. Other backdoors can be put there maliciously by programmers. That's less common. And so what the FBI wants is a backdoor into the encryption, so that in addition to using the normal password to the encrypted volume, there's also a secret password that the FBI has that they can use for it. Now the FBI doesn't like it being called backdoor because that sounds bad. So because the FBI is pushing this, they're saying no, it's more like a front door because everybody knows about it. Okay, whatever the terminology you want to use, it's the same concept, which is the government has a secret key that can be used to decrypt everybody's computer, and they're only supposed to use it. They're only supposed to use it when they get a court order. Who's assuring that that is the case? No one, really. And so most technical people who have commented on this issue have said that this is a really horrible idea. I'm not that big of a fan of it either, but it is an issue of public importance that everybody should be aware of both sides of it. So in this scenario, if the FBI, for this to work, first the FBI would have to literally outlaw using encryption that is not approved by the government. So it would be illegal to write software and then run it if it does something that the government doesn't like. Now currently that's not the case. If you write software and you run it on your own computer, can't think of a case where the government would have a problem with that. If you write a virus and you release it to the world, okay, the government has a problem with that, and it should. However, I think this has a potentially serious impact on software creativity and on research, because it means that, for instance, I wrote loop amnesia. That is an implementation of a cryptographic algorithm, AES. That if under the FBI's proposed regime, I guess it would be illegal to write stuff like that. Which, obviously I'm not. It was fun for me to write that. I want to be able to do it in the future. So just personally, that's an issue. Another issue is there is a lot of cryptography out there already. There are, like I just told you, there are three different. There's TrueCrypt, DMCrypt, Loop AES, Trezor, and Loop Amnesia, which are based on Loop AES and DMCrypt. BitLocker, File Vault, and just dozens of other algorithms out there. Dozens of other programs out there. There are multiple algorithms out there. Off the top of my head, I can think of AES, TrueCrypt, not TrueCrypt, AES, Twofish, Blowfish, Serpent, Triple DES, which nobody should use, and I'm sure there are others that I'm not thinking of. Oh, Cast5, that's another one. Cast5, Cast6. There are probably at least 10 generic algorithms for encryption out there. So you would have to outlaw a lot of software that's already out there, and outlaw running that. That's going to be an issue because people are already using it. The government's using it. The government's using disk encryption. Companies are using disk encryption. There are probably tapes that use disk encryption in data storage facilities somewhere. And getting everybody to go and erase that or re-encrypt it with something the government can break, that would be a big project, and probably somebody would forget to do it or continue using what they've always used without knowing it's now illegal and get put into jail when they probably shouldn't be. Also, the penalty would have to be for using this disk encryption for using unapproved disk encryption would have to be very severe. Otherwise, criminals who are doing something bad enough would still find it to be worth it to use disk encryption, because if they get caught, it's a lesser penalty. So it just from the perspective of someone who's loves computer science and all, a world where you can't write programs and then run them on your own computer without affecting anyone else's computer, without doing anything else, it's really a significant restriction on intellectual freedom. I would say, and so that's one issue that I think is important to think about when thinking about this. From a public policy standpoint, from another standpoint, just effectiveness and the potential risks. If every piece of disk encryption can be broken by a certain key, if it's encrypted with a certain key that only the FBI has, how to do that is not obvious off the top of just looking at it. It's not obvious how it would even be possible, because if you build the key into the disk encryption, this crippled disk encryption software, then some programmer could reverse engineer the key and then decrypt everybody's hard drive. Now you could use public key encryption to store the key. So you could say, okay, there's this public key. This is the way PGP works, kind of. You can encrypt something without revealing. You can encrypt something that can only be decrypted using a key you don't have. So you could use public key encryption to encrypt the password with the government's key, and then have the government, and then the government would be able to decrypt the password and decrypt the disk. So that would probably be how you would build a backdoor like that in. The problem with that is then if somebody breaks into the government computer that's storing this key, and if police and the FBI are routinely doing this, the key is that private key is probably going to be copied around quite a bit. All it takes is one person to get that key, and then everybody's communications can be revealed. So you could say, okay, store half of the key with the company, half of the key with the government. Okay, that makes it a little bit harder. That's another proposal. So far, no laws have been proposed to do this. But I do want to point out one thing that happened sometime in the past. During the Clinton administration, there was no law passed about this, but during the Clinton administration, it was actually illegal to export cryptography from the U.S., which caused a really interesting thing to happen. People printed out cryptographic software in a book, and then took the book out of the U.S. and then OCR'd the book, scanned the book. This was in like the 1990s, so scanners were, and OCR software wasn't what it is today. But they did it. They printed out like 6,000 pages of software code, and then took it out of the U.S. And if anybody called them on it, they were going to say, well, all I was doing was taking a book out of the U.S., and that's an unconstitutional infringement on free speech. Which is another issue. The Supreme Court has said that anonymous speech can be protected. So this idea about having the government being able to break into everybody's private communications might even be unconstitutional. The court would have to rule on that. Anyway, at the time it was illegal to export encryption software from the U.S. So, however, the government, this was during the Clinton administration, the government recognized that encryption software over time was going to be a problem. So they had an initiative called the Clipper chip. It was supposed to be that you would have this special piece of hardware that you would put into devices that used encryption, and it had a hidden key that the government could use. And they had special phones sold with this. So you could buy a phone where if somebody else bought the same type of phone, you could talk to each other and only the government could eavesdrop on your communication, no one else, because it was using this Clipper chip. That never caught on. The Clipper chip was a commercial failure of the highest order. And the government abandoned it, I think, by the end of the Clinton administration. They started doing it about 1993, 1994. By 1999, they'd stopped. And since then, basically, the government hasn't been doing anything. The export restrictions on encryption were lowered, so it now is legal to export software from the U.S., export cryptographic software from the U.S., and we don't have to worry about that anymore. We being software engineers in the U.S. And basically the issue died for about 15 years until now the head of the FBI is basically saying, let's go back to the Clipper chip. So it's very interesting to me that this is coming up again. And it is something that, I think it is something that you should know about. It is technically possible to do it. There are risks, and the risks are very high. Government computers have been hacked. I mean, Edward Snowden, basically, there are bad actors in the government. Edward Snowden, whether you think he's a bad actor or not, he did break through the NSA's security and was able to get a lot of secret information that he was not supposed to have access to, and then he revealed it. So the government computers are not, that secure. They're not unbreakable. So it has a single point of failure. And it's been tried before, and it didn't work then. And my opinion is that it's not going to work now. I'm not terribly worried about it because I don't think that this is going to go anywhere. We have the cat's out of the bag. Encryption software is everywhere. If you made it illegal, you'd make criminals of a whole bunch of people overnight for just doing what they've always done. And so I guess I'm not terribly worried that the director of the FBI is going to get his way. However, it is interesting that he's even suggesting this. I'm not sure what the I guess I think he probably just doesn't know the history of this issue. And he's worried that criminals are going to not be, he's not going to be able to catch criminals because of disk encryption. And I guess that is a legitimate fear. However, the number of crimes that you absolutely need to be able to break into someone's computer to prosecute probably aren't that many. If you're going after a drug dealer, catch him with the drugs. Just arrest him while he has the drugs on him and you've got him. You don't need to see his drug sheet finance spreadsheet on his computer to be able to get him from that. So I guess I would say that just from a societal standpoint, it's better for people to be able to have completely private information that nobody else can access than it is to make it so that the government can catch more criminals. So anyway, that's the issue. There's no slide on this, but that was all about the FBI director's recent comments. And you can, I'm sure if you search for FBI director encryption, you'll probably find something. Yeah, here's the FBI director attacks companies for embracing encryption. Yeah, you can find a bunch of information on that. So the last thing I want to talk about is the Fifth Amendment. It's a related issue. The Fifth Amendment is the right against self-incrimination. So it's different from the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment is the government can't go through your stuff unless they have a good reason. The Fifth Amendment is you can't be forced to tell the government anything that could be used to prosecute you. And so courts have taken different stances on whether people have a Fifth Amendment right not to reveal the passwords to encrypted disks. So if you're using the hard disk encryption, government arrests you, they get a warrant, so fulfilling the Fourth Amendment requirement, to search your computer, and then they can't do it because there's an encrypted disk. And then they go to you and say, tell us the password to the disk. Can you say, I refuse to answer on the grounds that it may tend to incriminate me, which is what you typically say if the Fifth Amendment applies to what you say. Can you then do that? Can you take the Fifth? Some people have, the way that courts have typically looked at this is they've applied their precedent, which U.S. courts do. That's how our system works, is you decide cases and then those cases serve as precedent for other cases. Current precedent is that you cannot be forced to reveal the combination for a safe. So think about that. You've got a safe with a combination lock, a bunch of numbers, 2285713, and you and you can't be forced to reveal that. Now the government can, of course, then break into the safe by just using, a blowtorch or however you break into safes. So that wasn't that big of an issue. You can be forced to produce the key to a safe. So if you have a safe that uses a physical key, you can be forced to provide that key, because that key is not testimony. The Fifth Amendment protects against testimony. Physical objects are objects. They're not things that you say. And so what it's come down to in a lot of cases is the court deciding, well, a disk encryption password is more like a combination lock, or a disk encryption password is more like a key. So think about that. Think of which do you think it's more like? I don't know. I guess I think it's more like a combination lock. Some law review articles have said, well, that's kind of too simplistic. They're not really combination locks, and they're not really combinations, and they're not really keys either. There's something different, and we should have a different rule for it. And the UCLA Law Review article that I read that took this position said, the rule should be that people should have to say it, because otherwise the government can't access people's computers at all. If they're using disk encryption, they have no way of getting at that information. They have, if if someone doesn't give them the combination to the safe, they just crack the safe. But you can't crack disk encryption. Therefore, people should be forced to say it, which is kind of a result-oriented thing. Basically, the Fifth Amendment is too convenient to law enforcement, therefore it should be limited, is what that argument boils down to. So I don't know about that. In any case, it's a very interesting, this is a very interesting story about how courts have looked at this. And so I do want to point you in the right direction if you want to look at this more. This lecture's already way too long, so I'm not going to go much further than this. But if you're interested in this issue, and this is probably going to be an issue that you can use for the essay, this is an excellent article to watch on it. Now, one thing that's happened since July 27, 2012 is the Massachusetts Supreme Court has looked at the issue and decided that forced disk decryption is not unconstitutional. So you can be forced in the state of Massachusetts, if you're in a state court, to reveal your disk encryption key unless you appeal it all the way up to the Supreme Court of the US and the Supreme Court decides to take it. That hasn't happened yet. So so until the Supreme Court rules on it, we don't really have a good answer, because we have basically a circuit split. It's not a circuit split because the only appellate circuit that's looked at this issue has said people do have a Fifth Amendment right not to provide the password to a disk. The Massachusetts Supreme Court decided opposite. So until the Supreme Court is the only court that is higher than both of those courts, so until the Supreme Court looks at it, we've kind of got an we've kind of got a situation where the law is just unclear, and that happens often with new technology. The law is just unclear, and it takes some cases. It takes the issue to come up a few times before it becomes clear. So that's that. That is the last thing that I wanted to talk about. So have a nice rest of the day, weekend, if you're watching this for the summer 2015 session of the class. And I'll post the information on the essay fairly soon.